It's having been involved in putting the program together, it's interesting to see that papers you weren't sure were going to come together actually do come together, because you're never sure of that when you put together sessions. But I'm really amazed by where my presentation now fits in. What I'm going to present today is really very different. I'm not actually talking about RCR training and the effectiveness of RCR training. Rather, what I'm going to present to you today is based on the hypothesis that the quality of RCR training rests on institutional engagement. Following up on the last talk, which suggests that universities do nothing to assess their risk, or using Liz's terms, needs, what I saw as someone who is a developer of RCR training, and particularly online RCR training, that probably my biggest challenge was engaging institutions. And then once I engaged them, it would be a lot easier to engage the students. So what I'm going to show you today is not really, it is an RCR training program, and I'd be happy to talk to you about the educational components of that, but I'm going to talk to you mostly about the evaluative components of that. So at this point, I'm Nick Steneck from the University of Michigan. I also work for Epigeum, which is a not-for-profit organization, as opposed to Citi, which is now a profit organization, strangely enough. And you see my colleagues up there on the program as well. And does this go forward? Am I pushing the right one? The green one? There it goes. Okay. So the background is I work for, as a consultant and a course developer for Epigeum, which is now owned by Oxford University Press. We develop online courses on teaching, research, studying, leadership, and management. My major focus is on research integrity and compliance training. And our current courses now include a comprehensive research integrity RCR course, a concise RCR course, and a humans protection course. And we're moving into the area of compliance training. And if you're interested, I can talk to you about that. So that's basically the courses and what I'd be talking about if I were talking about the design of our courses. So we focus on beginning researchers with one set of courses, and we focus on experienced researchers with another set of our courses. What I'm going to talk to you today about is the impact program. And the objective of this is to assess the methods of our training. The methods of our training are we present content, but we also have embedded poll questions and survey questions. And the impact program is aggregating the data we collect into information for universities. We're interested in, I'm interested in the focus of our assessment, or working on different foci for our circuit. So I'm looking at learning, behavior, and climate. Those are the three things I'm going to talk about. And then one of the things I'm very interested in is how we report all of this to universities. Because unless we report what we're pulling out to universities in a way that they understand, they'll never be able to use it. What I'm going to talk today about is mostly relative judgments, not absolute. We're looking to develop benchmark data and not actual numbers, i.e. how many people are committing misconduct, how much plagiarism do you have, and so on. But where do various departments, programs, and so on stand in relationship to each other? So I'm trying to enhance transparency and accountability of the risks or needs of institutions is what we're trying to do. The impact system is itself fairly simple. We have learners and we have a database. So our learners register for a course. When they register, we collect a certain amount of demographic information about them. And at the same time, we have some embedded surveys and polls on that, and we feed that data into our database. We do have a fairly comprehensive certification system, a rubric-based certification system. Again, that's on the training side. I'm not going to talk about that. But what I'm going to talk about is the impact side, where we're collecting that other data to help an institution understand what are its needs in RCR training and why should it have RCR training. I'm going to report on pilot data today. We're now piloting our short course for experienced researchers at 3 U.S. universities. And I also did a standalone pilot study at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and that's what I'm going to be reporting on today. The pilot learning results I'm going to report out are a little bit on our learning assessment, how much did they learn, and then I'm going to report something on climate assessment, and I'm also going to report on behavior assessment. And again, these are things that we're generating for institutions to help them understand why they need training, where they need training, how to develop it. And again, as I say, the focus is on relative and how we represent it. So much of what I'm going to translate into a red to green scale, which is really bad and really good. And that's what I'm trying to get on universities to do, is to think, what's the really bad and what's the really good, and what do they need to focus on as they go through. So when you look at the learning assessment, we have fairly complex learning assessment, but this is the some very basic. We have some knowledge assessment, and then we have some pre-post and 6 months out assessment. And that 6 months out assessment is one that we're working on. I'd love to work with blended learning programs here to see how our online training then works as we go through blended learning. It's one of the things that we'll do as we go forward. So we have a couple of questions. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but the first one is, how would you report misconduct? And what we're trying to test here is, would you go to your research integrity officer, or would you report right to the person? And of course, you know that the guidance is, well, there's some risk in going to the person who committed it, so you probably ought to go to the research integrity officer, but do they understand that? How many of them understand at the beginning? And the second one is, should you put your PI's name on a paper even if the PI didn't do anything, true or false? And when we go through, this is what we see in our pre-post test at this point. We're able to affect some change in both questions. Interestingly, we're able to affect more change in the authorship question over the reporting misconduct question. And again, what I would suggest here is this now raises a design question for our learning in this case, or anybody else's kind. In other words, why were we able to impact what they thought about reporting misconduct less than what they thought about authorship? Was it the design of our training, our question format, the relevance of the learning? Certainly one of the things they'd like to know is that they don't have to put their PI's name on a paper, and maybe they're more apt to pick that up than they are the reporting misconduct one another. But again, the idea here is making transparent what's going on in the training, and at the same time demonstrating that there is some impact. Of course, the depressing thing here is the large size of the red curve, and that is how much misunderstanding there still is at the end of the course. And that's something we obviously have to grapple with. On climate, this is all based on the standalone survey at the University of Tennessee. It's all been IRB approved. It's probably not a statistically significant sample at this point, but we're using it for our design changes at this point. We asked 6 demographic questions and 18 climate questions. And I'm going to report back on climate on personal, or we're collecting data on personal climate, institutional climate, and professional climate, i.e., how do you feel in your own setting? What do you think about your institutional climate? And then what's your relationship with your colleagues out there? So those are the 3 levels on which we're surveying. These will be available later, but this is just a little bit of the population that we have out there. So you can see we have a large number of departments. We have more women answering than men, and it's primarily faculty that are answering at this particular time on this poll question. So if you look at institutional climate pressures, and this is one where I want to show you how what we're trying to do is to give something to an administrator that will help that administrator understand what's going on campus. So this is a series of questions that are saying, are those pressures very unreasonable on a scale to very reasonable? And of course, there's probably nothing here that surprises you. And that is that the pressure to get funding is the least reasonable. To be a leader, i.e. publish and do all those things, is the next reasonable. Engage professionally, have students is a lesser pressure, and they feel that the constant nagging they get to operate responsibly is also reasonable. But it gives you, and again, this is my objective, it gives someone an instant snapshot on what's going on here. And I'll skip through that. I just want to go through. You can then break that down with this system and take a look at particular departments. And there, what you can see, and it's interesting when you go through this, to see which departments perceive there's more pressure and which perceive there's less, or you can break it down by gender to see where it goes through, or you can break it down by student groups to see where it goes. So again, you raise the point that they don't do the assessment. I understand they don't do it, and they don't do it because they have no tools. And that's, again, what we're trying to do so that you now have information to go ahead and say, all right, this department, that department needs to do this. And again, the representation here, the numbers aren't what matter, but it's in the green area, you're going toward reasonable, in the red area, you're going toward unreasonable. And what are your departments that are heavily in the unreasonable or the reasonable area out there? For behavior, most of the behavior I'm going to try to report on a thermometer, red to green. And the reason is I'm trying to locate our discussions of integrity someplace within that integrity scale. We have lots of conversations about integrity, but what is high integrity? What are highest standards for integrity? So how do we go through that? So I'll just show you, we have personal, institutional, and professional perspectives. And I'll just show you one slide here. This is personal behavior. And you can see that the left-hand side over there is their attitude toward best practices, and then a variety of things of how they respond to best practices and where they stand and how they go through. And then we place that on the climate to show you that we're not talking at the bottom ends, but we're talking at the upper ends of research integrity. In other words, not going from very bad, but we're not as good as we could be, that we should go to better. And then we have institutional behavior in there, again, placed on the climate scale, and professional behavior. And I want to close with this one by just showing you that this is a standard measure that's been used before, and that is, do you meet the standards for responsible conduct of research? Do you live up to best practices? And most researchers will say they don't. And then you ask them about their colleagues, and they'll tell you their colleagues are worse. And we're using this as a check and find out that it's a consistent pattern. This is now between our institutional survey and our embedded courses at that point as to what we have. So again, my concluding remarks here is all of this will be revised on the basis of pilot data. We're going to develop then implementation guidelines, and our long-term objectives here, as I began at the beginning, is to increase the transparency of what's going on and therefore the accountability of universities as they develop research integrity programs. So again, this is totally apart from the training itself, but it's something else we've built into the training with the hypothesis that if institutions would pay more attention, we'd have better RCR programs. Thank you very much.
Questions? Any question? No? So, Nick, this is a kind of needs assessment that you do. I mean, based on these responses, for example, on pressure, you better design materials so that you meet the expectations of that group, for example. This is a sort of needs assessment.
It is a needs assessment. And it's a needs assessment that I developed after years of experience of talking on campuses and finding administrators who just were absolutely, what do you mean, integrity problems? I don't have any, or I don't know if I have any integrity problems, and why should I put any money more? I mean, everybody is asked about how much money is put into RCR education. And when I look at my own university with a $1.2 billion research budget, and it's telling me that $3,500 for the city course is too much, and we certainly can't invest any more, somebody's not really looking at their campus and trying to decide that research integrity training is important. So that's when I backed up and simply decided, sure, the only way I'm going to educate students is if I start to educate the universities. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the goal of it is. And as I said, it's only one component of what we're doing, because we're still focusing on the education, a city-type approach, blended learning, and all of those sorts of things. But it's another added feature that we've built in at this point that I think is essential if we're ever going to get serious attention to RCR training.
Okay. Thank you, Nick.